We have often heard the phrase, COVID-19 does not discriminate. While it's true that we are all susceptible to the virus, the pandemic has disproportionately impacted the vulnerable populations, people of lower income status, and minority groups. The pandemic has also exposed the underlying conditions which have been plaguing our societies around the world for years. The important questions confronting us today, therefore, are: what is our individual as well as collective responsibility to ensure that the most vulnerable groups are not left behind in the recovery process? And what more are we going to do to remove the conditions and the systemic inequities that continue to deny opportunities for many who need them most to get ahead in their lives? Our panel is uniquely qualified to speak to these important issues, as they are at the forefront of fighting for racial equity and social justice. They are Ajit George, Director of Operations, Shanti Bhavan Children's Project, a passionate advocate of the transformative power of education for the underprivileged and socially discriminated. Shanti Bhavan empowers children from India's lowest socioeconomic class to break the cycle of generational poverty through education, leadership, and compassion. Pradip Pariyar, a social activist from Nepal and executive director of Samata Foundation, an independent think tank specializing in the area of caste-based issues concerning Dalit community of Nepal. Pradip is an Asia 21 of 2018. Cherrie Atilano, president and founding farmer of AGREA Philippines and Asia 21 class of 2017. AGREA seeks to end rural poverty by helping farmers move from subsistence to small-scale commercial farming. And the moderator for the session, Luna Ranjit, co-founder of Adhikaar, a New York-based nonprofit organization that promotes human rights and social justice for all. She's now a writer and strategy consultant, Asia 21 class of 2013. Luna, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sanjeev Rai. And good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I am currently in New York. It's 9 p.m. here, but we know that it's already tomorrow in Hong Kong. So thank you everyone for joining from across the world, and especially to our panelists, welcome. And every year since our first summit in 2013, I have marked off this week on my calendar, but the stars never aligned. So in a way, I must say I'm grateful for this silver lining amidst the pandemic that has allowed so many of us to join from all over the world. I think I heard Tom say earlier, 40 countries. And so earlier this year, this phrase Arundhati Roy wrote about went viral, and it got circulated widely, that pandemic is a portal. It's an opportunity to build a new world. And we are convening for the summit around the same questions. How can we build back better? I believe that we're all on the same page. We don't want to go back to the normal. The pandemic has not just highlighted the inequities that exist among countries and within countries, but it's also shown us some of the things we took for granted, those systems are so fragile. And we agree that we want to do better. But I'm also thinking about how do we create a more equitable world within a system that has allowed billionaires to become so much richer in this midst of a pandemic. Exact figures vary, but billionaires have collectively gained almost $1 trillion just since the beginning of this year. How do we seek equity within a world where richer countries are banding together to block poorer countries from accessing essential medicines and medical supplies, even right now? I mean, we are celebrating the speed with which new vaccines have been created, but along with it, we're also concerned about vaccine apartheid developing. I mean, I do believe that change is possible, but also that the odds are stacked very high. But what does give me hope are the folks like our panelists today and this other speakers who we've already heard from, who have been working to narrow these opportunity gaps, who have been thinking about a more equitable world long before the pandemic started. I mean, I would love to hear more about, what are some of the new challenges and opportunities that you have encountered this year, and how your past work is informing your current work and helping guide the post-pandemic planning that you're doing, or if you're even in that space to get to think about post-pandemic at this time. We'll start with Cherrie, and Cherrie, take it up.
Yeah, thank you very much, Luna. So I'm Cherrie. I've been working with the agriculture sector for 22 years. Basically, started teaching farmers at the age of 12. So it's been more than 2 decades. In the past 2 decades of my experience in the agriculture sector, especially we work with smallholder farmers who are actually basically, earning less than $1 a day. And some of them couldn't afford to send their children to school. I always say it and share to friends that it's a crime against humanity that the producers of the food in the food chain are actually the poorest and the hungriest. So they should be having that enough food, having enough sustenance, and having enough money to support their family. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Especially during this COVID-19 pandemic, that vaccine is not yet available, especially in developing countries. Food, I think, is the most important vaccine we have. The more we need to stay healthy. And during this COVID-19 pandemic, the farmers never failed us. They were there. They had a problem of even having access to market in terms of their food produce. The produce of the farmers were rotting on their fields because of the community quarantine or, lockdown, as we called it in our communities. They lost their market. And unfortunately, these farmers have been suffering, during this pandemic when our president announced, for example, that the lockdown happened. It's the height of harvest season because it's summer season. So they were nowhere to go. And most of them were struggling. They're in debt, generational debt, because the agriculture sector for so long has been very dependent on unscrupulous kind of trading system. And it's not only happening, I guess, in the Philippines. It's mostly happening, in India. I go to India every month, and this is the pressing problem. They're always at the mercy of traders. They're always at the mercy of loan giver, right, or provider. So what I'm trying to say is after this COVID-19, since food and agriculture has never been talked about until COVID, and agriculture had played a major role, hopefully we can give enough support to our farmers, not only to providing market for the produce, but to really create an ethical and trade system that will make them survive and thrive. And second one is I really, fight against the human rights of farmers. For example, in my country, we've been passing out bill for Magna Carta of women in agriculture by next year in our Congress. It's because unlocking potential to women farmers, most of the time, they are the invisible workers, the unheard voices and the unsung heroes that are actually contributing more than 60% in the agricultural food supply chain, unfortunately unrecognized. And there are not enough potential for them. And lastly, we are actually working on giving more voices for young people in agriculture because our farmers are endangered species. It's a global problem. Our farmers are aging with very poor and low educational attainment. If we will not address this problem, this will be a global threat. Actually, there's an assessment that COVID is not the real threat. Hunger brought by COVID is the real threat. Right now, hunger, malnutrition all over the world is doubling in number, and it's also causing a lot of social issues and crimes all over. So hopefully, in the sector of especially the smallholder farmers, we give them enough support, not only on their education, also access to market, but more importantly, financial support and investments. Because if we can unlock this potential, this will massively trajectorize, the adaptation of new sustainable technologies to progress our work. Lastly, our population is insatiably growing. So all the more we need to focus on helping this sector because this is the only sector that is also a foundation of so many industries and sectors. Thank you very much, Luna.
Thank you, Cherrie. And I guess we should all remember, like, farmers have never failed us, always, but especially in this pandemic. And with that, I think we'll move next to Ajit George and hear from.
Thank you, Luna. I'm Ajit George. I'm the Director of Operations of the Shanti Bhavan Children's Project. Our organization has been in operations for over 23 years, and our goal is a twin purpose of education for the poorest of the poor, families that make less than $2 a day, and the poverty alleviation, the breaking of that cycle of poverty. So not simply education, but the outcome of uplifting a child from poverty so that they are able to self-sustain themselves, but also lift up their family and their communities from poverty. Our program starts with children entering into our boarding school program at the age of 4, and they continue with us until they graduate from high school at the age of 18. Then we pay for their entire college, their undergraduate degree, as well as medical care and support while they finish college. So really our program starts from the first day of school and ends at the first day of work. And they have gone on to white-collar professional jobs in India and across the world. This topic is a complex topic, and I've given it a lot of thought before this panel. And I know there'll be an opportunity to discuss a lot of different topics. So I'll really focus on the core thing that we do, which is education. I think education is the great equalizer, and the power to alleviate that opportunity gap, to close that opportunity gap, and to support those who are in an incredibly complex position, especially around COVID. And listening to Cherrie talk about food, I'm thinking around the same things. We serve communities in South India. So all of our children come from South India. And what we have noticed during COVID is there is a greater food insecurity, but there's also all sorts of other issues associated with that, shelter, access to medical care, multiple other areas that are causing a lot of problems for the poorest of the poor. And what they are doing, even in greater numbers than before, are taking loans from illegal money lenders or illegal forms of borrowing money at very high interest rates. This is basically forcing them into some sort of indentured servitude, or putting them into incredibly vulnerable spaces where they will probably not be able to alleviate their loans for the rest of their lives. And they're going to be trapped in this situation of poverty, not just simply because of lack of access to opportunity, but lack of accessibility to break out of the current situation where they are owing huge sums of money. And when I think about education, I think about education as the opportunity to level that playing field, and the opportunity to break that and to solve those problems. And what I'll do is I'll give you 2 anecdotes by alumni of ours that really speak to that, and why education, I think, is that vehicle towards upward mobility. First anecdote is from a graduate, and they say, "My family was in a lot of debt when I finished college. I'd recently lost my father and had money lenders knocking on my door to collect money. I needed to clear all of my father's debt piled up over the years. Thanks to my accounting and finance education from Shanti Bhavan in college, I was able to get money lenders to renegotiate terms of the loans, and I restructured the loans to pay them all over the next 5 years. For a long time, I used most of my income to clear the debt." And the second anecdote was, "It's been 4 years since I started working, and I'll be leaving this month to pursue an MBA on a full fellowship." Actually, by this point, the young lady who wrote this has already started her MBA. "Working in Amazon for 2 years, I covered the house rent, cost of basic necessities, my father's de-addiction expenses, my mother's medical bills, and my brother's education. However, the 4 of us still lived in a single room with 1 shared bathroom and a kitchen. After Amazon, I changed jobs to work at the VF Corporation, a leading apparel and footwear company. With an increase in my salary, I moved my family out of the slums into a safer environment with a regular supply of water and electricity. I continue to pay for my brother to attend college and support my 3 cousins with their education since their father was killed. Apart from the 2 full-time jobs I've held, I've also worked part-time jobs teaching, babysitting on weekends, and content writing to support my family. And I use those examples to really show why education is so powerfully important in the era of COVID, and why it can close that opportunity gap, and why it can really level the playing field for those that are most vulnerable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ajit. And I really appreciate you speaking about education as a great equalizer, but also that education, there are so many barriers. Right? And I really appreciate you connecting those and not thinking of like, okay, we take one person, like educate them, and then everything will be solved. So
right.
I really appreciate that. And with that, I think we'll go to Pradip. Pradip, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Actually, I'm in field trip, so I couldn't connect my laptop, so I'm just joined from my mobile. Thank you very much for having me today. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. Cherrie mentioned about the food. Right now, I'm in the flat Madhesh in Nepal, flat land, and then talking from Janakpur. And then yesterday, I met one of the family member. One of the family member died because of hunger. His name is Malar Sada, and then I visited his family yesterday. During the long lockdown, he couldn't get the food for 5 days, and he died back in June. So food is very important for most marginalized and vulnerable peoples. And thank you for raising this issue, Cherrie. Let me start with this example. I'm working on one of the most marginalized community, that's so-called untouchable, and in South Asia, Dalit. So recently we did one latest survey that was done, assess the impact of COVID-19 on Nepal's most marginalized community, especially Dalit community. And Dalit are considered untouchable and have been facing caste-based inequalities like racial inequalities because of their caste. So the survey reveals Dalit in Nepal experience discrimination and prejudicing during distribution of COVID relief materials and medical supplies. Also, Dalit elected representatives were kept out of the decision-making process concerning the COVID-19 related services and support aids. And during the lockdown in May, one of the guy young guy, his name is Nabraj Bika, he tried to marry with the so-called upper caste girls, and then villagers, family and villagers killed Nabraj and his 5 friends. So that kind of incidents happening in Nepal. And then not only from the non-state actor, state also killed Dalit here. So during the lockdown, there's more than 3 Dalit killed in especially in the police custody. So that kind of incident happening here. And then we are now meeting so many families, victim families during my trip. So more than 30 people killed during the lockdown and then this COVID pandemic. If we talk about the COVID pandemic and then first hit to most marginalized people, I gave an example of Malar Sadai who is dying because of hunger. And there's a Surya Bahadur Tamang in Kathmandu in the capital city, and then he died because of hunger. So in our survey also, no equitable distribution of relief package for the most marginalized and vulnerable peoples. And there is a blanket approach was adopted by the duty various, hence Dalit were more marginalized during the pandemic, especially non-Dalits with the good political connection were more benefited during the pandemic, which I call here structural dividends. Dalit were excluded further left behind, especially in the COVID pandemic, especially COVID pandemic time, and still it's ongoing. And mostly Dalit in Nepal live in daily wage worker. Due to COVID-19, their livelihood is completely affected, and they don't have a job. And then there's a huge issues of hunger. Looking at the finding of the survey, and it is very likely that the Dalit are going to be left behind the post-COVID-19 recovery efforts also. This will make Dalits and other marginalized group more vulnerable with no coping opportunity. Therefore, it is an urgent need that the post-COVID-19 recovery efforts should pay careful and special attention to measure to ensure the most vulnerable are not left out in this process. I think mapping and identifying the vulnerability status before doing and post-COVID-19 recovery effort is very important. That's one of the opportunity I can see. No blanket approach should be applied. And then, for example, like Samata Foundation working as a think tank, so we can give suggestion and feedback to local and province and federal governments. And there is a need of a special policy that ensure the vulnerable are included in the relief efforts. I see there is opportunity to working and collaborate with the government to make policies which can ensure vulnerables are included in the relief efforts. So in last point, the post-COVID-19 recovery report can be opportunity to rebuilding a more equitable, just and inclusive world if it is done carefully and with an extra cautions. That's one of the important things I'm thinking. Maybe let me stop here.
Thank you, Pradip. And I appreciate you're mentioning the survey, and in many ways, for marginalized communities, that's data is like one way to prove the stories that you know from the community. And as a think tank, you have used that tool to really get your voice heard and get taken seriously by the government, at least to the extent possible. We have a question from the audience right now, to address generally. What do you think are the top 3 commitments organizations or companies must make to advance racial and social justice beyond COVID-19?
I could answer that. I have at least one thing that I can, or 1 to 2 things that I've directly observed. The first one is really restructuring their onboarding and training program. I've definitely noticed that certain corporations have a very low level of training and onboarding, and they're not tailored for marginalized communities or individuals that maybe their first white-collar professional job, right? And so they don't have the institutional knowledge, the generational knowledge, the family knowledge. They don't have mentors and tutors or supporters that might be able to guide them. And so these corporations, and I've seen this both in the US and in India, so I have very strong firsthand experience with this, really kind of throw marginalized individuals into the deep end as they enter the workforce. And invariably, when a large portion of them fail or don't meet up to the mark, they get cut, and then they kind of fulfill the cycle of, oh, marginalized individuals aren't good enough for the work. We need to be hiring some of the same, right? Some of the same often codes in a very specific way, maybe white, maybe male, maybe upper caste, maybe wealthy, maybe higher levels of education, masters or whatever, right? A lot of these problems would be really easily solved if they could get retool their maybe HR systems or retool their training programs to do really smart integrated onboarding and training for the first 3 to 6 months as new crops of employees come into their companies. And I think they would have a much higher success rate in that process. And I read a Harvard Business Review article recently that talks about how managers for one of these companies, I don't remember which company it was, started really forcing their managers to do training all the time, onboarding, like they were going to train their low-level employees, which is something that higher-level managers don't do often. But regardless of where your rank was in the company, you're constantly training. And so it forced them to be in constant contact with lower-level employees. It made them understand the challenges their lower level employees were having and helped them retool the systems to improve the experiences of lower level employees. I think if all companies are doing this and are thinking about these really integrated onboarding programs, you're going to have a much greater level of success. The second, and this is number 2, and I don't have 3, but I have 2, maybe they're, offshoots of each other, but is not just mentoring, and I would say not even just sponsoring, but I guess this is, like I said, an offshoot of number 1, is to do training where a higher level executive or a mid-level manager is taking under their wing, a few marginalized employees who've just entered the company and doing very basic training, not simply on their tasks, but how to code to the company's culture. And often that's another issue that comes up is, do you fit into the culture? Well, that often means, do you know to say the right things at the company parties or the company meetings? Do you know how to handle interviews? I got feedback recently about somebody who was brilliant on paper, passed all the tests that were required, but flubbed some really easy questions on the interview. And that's because she just wasn't trained to handle those interview questions appropriately. And I think if those with that white collar professional knowledge can take the time to do training, and not just mentoring, but actual training on very practical things about how to enter the white collar professional workforce and then increase your position in the white collar professional workforce, it will do wonders. So those are 2 ideas right off the top of my head.
Cherrie and Pradip.
Yeah, can I add into that? During this COVID-19 pandemic, we launched the Move Food initiative of my company. It's basically connecting the farmers closer to the consumers. I'm so happy about it because I think this is the silver lining of the COVID-19, despite all the negative, effects of the COVID. But, for the longest time, it's so hard to break the trading systems. For example, in Southeast Asia, or in the Philippines in particular, we have 5 to 8 layers of traders, right? So when you get tomato at a cent from a farmer, usually you get at $2 per kilo when it reached the supermarket because of the layers of traders. So what we did with the Move Food initiative, it's a very practical solution on how can we shorten the gap of the consumers and the producers, because during the lockdown, no one is actually willing to go out. They're all afraid. And I think with all our might, we're a very small company, but we want to be a quality company. We told our team, let's do this, and we put ourselves at risk. And this initiative right now, it partnered with so many private organizations and companies. So with all their partnerships, we kind of help them restructure their CSR program, the corporate social responsibilities, in where this money, instead of pre-COVID, they usually just, sponsor events and gathering and meetings, right? So this time they want to be more relevant. So we help them restructure on how to put their CSR money into really helping farmers. So actually with this work, we help now almost 640,000 poorest of the poor. These are people who are living in slums. They couldn't get out. They're ambulant vendors. They had no money because they're so dependent on, just selling on the street to earn money. So with that one, it's really the CSR program that it needs to be more sustainable and tangible, and it needs to be, direct driven. Second one, I think because everyone now is so dependent on online buying. No one is going to the supermarket anymore. I think one of the things that these corporations could also incorporate is, I share this in one of the discussions here in Philippine agriculture actually. It's I eat, my brother eats, I eat, my sister eats, kind of a movement where all these corporations, especially those with stable income, can actually introduce a platform to their employees that if we adopt a farming communities, that would sustain the food supply of my employees, this is another benefit. I heard a lot of questions last time that, some companies, they're cutting their benefits to their employees. there's no transportation benefit anymore or uniform benefit anymore or whatever, because you're stuck in your home, you're working from home. So a lot of those benefits are cut off. So if we restructure this kind of money into like adapting a farming community, for example, that could sustain, it's like CSA, you know, community sustainable agriculture, where like you adopt a farming community and can supply food in your workforce. You know, it can be delivered in your doorstep, because these are the things that are doable, which means it's a straight market for the farmers. And at the same time, it's a stable, you know, and healthier consumerism pattern. And lastly, during the hype of the lockdown in Metro Manila, I received a call from several BPO industries, and they're asking me that they did a survey that a lot of their women are actually suffering mental and physical fatigue because of working from home. You know, you have your child studying, you know, homeschooling. You don't know anymore the delineation between your role as a wife, as a mother, as an employee, that your boss is waiting for you in Zoom call or whatever platforms, right? So you don't know what to do. So what we also did, we work very practical ways with some organizations, some banks in the Philippines, on really like asking the women on what they want to do just to transition their energy. So you know what? Urban gardening is actually your number one choice, because they said, you know, we want to grow our own food, and it's just a joy to divert your attention or your energy on growing something that makes you, you know, joyful and hopeful. So we eventually launched like a grow kit to support urban gardeners in Metro Manila, and it is becoming so effective. A lot of women are so happy. It's a cure for mental health for women. It's also a joy that they can get source of food from their own backyard or a container gardening from their own patio. And, you know, it makes them more productive and happier people. So those are like interventions that we have been doing for the last 8 months that are very doable, very replicable, and it can scale.
Thank you, Cherrie, for these like very concrete suggestions. Pradip.
Yeah, thank you. Cherrie mentioned about the gardening. That's very interesting. So I spent some time in gardening during the lockdown. I just want to share some of the incident. I already shared about the Rukum incident where 6 people, young people, killed from the villagers, and after that, we went to Parliament committee, and then we discussed with the parliamentarian, how can we change this kind of situation? And then we talked with the police chief, and then parliamentary committee endorsed to make Dalit cell in all the police station. So one of the things what we are doing as a think tank, we are trying to change the policies. So after that incident, we talked with the parliamentary committees, and then police chief, and then now we are trying lobbying for the police within the police systems, Dalit cell in police system. So that's kind of things we're doing. One is policy change. Second, important thing is internet and communication is very important. So marginalized people didn't get the information. So we started the conversation in television. So through the television, so also. So the media is one of the things very important. So we run the television. So we run the radio program. So that's 2 things is very important. So media and then communication is one of the platform where everyone getting the information, but they are not getting the right information. So that's why we put the special programs for most marginalized and Dalit community, even in the local language. That's second thing we did. Third one is, how can we engage with this social justice issues is very important. So most of the time when we started engaging on these issues, when we are thinking, most of the people thinking in the PT way, so how can we be humble and then respectful on these issues? And that's important questions for all of us. So we are giving a lot of information and communication through this channel. So in my views, there is a three thing: invest. How can we more invest on this most marginalized people is very important. So engage after the investment. There's the engage with good intention. How can we engage in this caste conversation or racial conversation with good intention? Third one is we can do partnership, so in different ways. So we can learn, share the ideas. And third one, especially for companies. So I used to work with the young people. I spend a lot of time working with the young people. So one of the important questions right now is many young people losing their jobs. So there is a job creation, especially most marginalized people. Within the marginalized people, young people are losing their job because there is a when we talk about the young people, there's always a question about the job. So especially companies, if they can create a more job for most marginalized people, especially young people, that will be one of the great things companies can do. So I can repeat, invest, engage, partners, and then job creation is important phenomena in post-COVID. That's the things. And then if we are doing this kind of things, and then if we can put the most marginalized, vulnerable women, young girls, farmers in the center, that would be great. All the companies and other organizations can do that. And then in that time, we can ensure the justice, racial equity, and we can in caste-based discrimination also. Maybe that's the example. Yeah.
Thank you. So just like from what I heard, like instead of like exactly this is what you need to do, it's really questioning like who is being left behind and how can you like think outside of the box, whether like, you know, it's like creating a new food like delivery system or thinking beyond mentorships or like, you know, or like creating new onboarding programs. And on that note, like there's another question that's a related question that came up. Like, have any of you heard of what or have thought about the concept of reverse mentorship? You know, it's often like mentorship is someone who has more experience mentoring. Right? I don't have the name, but I recently saw a TED talk about upper level executives being mentored by employees of color with regards to race, inclusion, and workplace environments. And in the workspaces you were working, what do you think about that?
Yeah.
Like, can we, I think, like, let's, I heard Cherrie first, let's go with Cherrie and then we'll, yeah.
This is so funny. Everyone gets so excited to answer. Beautiful. Thank you for someone who asked that question. So in my company, actually, we have this very strict hiring policy. So because we work in the farming sector, even myself, I always immerse in the farming community 3 times a year. You know, I basically live in a farmer's house for like 3 days to a week. So it's a protocol in our company that before you get hired during your 6 months probation period, you basically go and stay in a farming community. You live in the farmer's house, wake up at 3 a.m. when they need to wake up and sleep at 8 p.m. because most of them don't have electricity. So they need to sleep at 8 p.m. You know, and they need to eat what the farmers are eating. They need to work what the farmers are working. And they really basically immerse themselves to study and learn from the farmers. And you know what, Luna, this has becoming so effective because, you know, our work is into social entrepreneurship. It's not like all the time you inject ideas and innovations and you're coming there as like a messianic complex, right? I'm like the best. I'm the coolest. I graduated from this top university. I have all the resources. And you know what? This experience that we've been doing in our company is humbling. You know, it's a mentorship program. The farmers and their families actually mentoring us. They teach us and they educate us how they live. They educate us what are their needs. And from there, they're actually making solutions on their own problem. It's not like you go there and try to make solutions in their problem. So this kind of mentorship, it's really like it's very effective for me personally. I'll always share this, that the farmers, and most of them, they don't know how to even read and write, but they are my best teachers because they co-develop certain technologies, certain ideas, certain solutions on their own problem. So I always say this, that in our company, we are just facilitators, even if sometimes, you feel like you're the most brilliant person in the room. When you immerse in their life and you're working with them, it humbles you because what they need is just very simple, solutions. What they need is just like a solution to a pressing problem, just for them to survive on a daily basis. And but what's more important, learning, I guess, is also they teach you how to dream because of that kind of mentorship, but you also capacitate them how to dream. Because most of them, they have like a dream, that they want to do, but they don't have the capacity to dream bigger. So in this kind of mentorship that's happening in our company, it's always a joy every time, like, a new hire is coming back to the office. We process the experience, and they said like, wow, that entire mentoring, that the farmers and his wife preparing coffee every morning, I eat breakfast with them. They teach me life. They teach me lessons that you cannot find in a book printed somewhere. They teach me life. They teach me real solutions. That problem, sometimes we think we need to think this super big solutions to their own problem, but they teach us very simple solution that is actually very applicable. And this solution, when it's given enough opportunity to be implemented, it's really has a massive effect in the community. And so we've been doing that even in our board members in the company. We bring them to the farming communities for this kind of mentorship also. And second mentorship actually that we've been doing, part of the reverse mentorship, is our company is actually basically run by mostly young people. Average age is around 28 years old. We did it this way. It's because farming is always like an old person kind of a job, right? It's not sexy at all because it's only for the old people. So during this, putting the young person in there and also teaching the old on sustainable ways on agriculture, being there, changing the landscape and the narrative of agriculture, that, agriculture also for the young person to embrace. You see the listening opportunity. And during this COVID-19 pandemic, it's not only about physical, distancing. It's really, I think, about social listening. And all the more, these practices that we've been doing on the ground, the social listening of older people to young people kind of mentorship, has been very, very effective. And we're doing it a lot in the AGREA farm school that, we have here in the Philippines. So I love the question, and I was so passionate to answer it. So I think it's Ajit's time.
Thank you, Cherrie. Yes, Ajit, go ahead.
Sure. I think actually Cherrie really answered it very smartly and covered a lot of things that I would have said in more depth. I'll keep it pretty short. Definitely reverse mentorship or sponsorship, reverse teaching in some form. An example was there was a couple of documentary series on our organization. One's called Daughters of Destiny on Netflix, but there was another one called The Backward Class, which is really only available in Canada. And I remember at a screening of The Backward Class, a number of the students that were there were in the film were actually at the screening, and some of their bosses were there. And there was companies from like EY and Goldman Sachs, and the boss of one of our students came up to me afterwards and said, he watched it and he had tears in his eyes, and he said, this changes everything. And he'd known our young man as just like one of his team members who was doing a really great job in the office and was really competent. But the film had given him a huge context on this young man's life and the challenge and hardships he faced and what was going on. And we've had similar experiences with Daughters of Destiny and how that has impacted their employers or teachers, right? I think what that speaks to me is if there is to create to change the approaches of bosses or corporations or systems around racial equity or supportive marginalized communities or, income equality, you have to create empathy. And the only way to create empathy is this continued education. And this is a two-way education. One is, obviously to the marginalized individual who needs that support. But the other, as Luna and Cherrie, you both have said, is the other way around, which forces those who hold power and those who hold position, and those who have not had these experiences of marginalization to be embedded deeply within those experiences and have ongoing conversations, in the workplace, outside of the workplace, go back to the lived conditions of where some of the marginalized individuals are. There's a number of our alumni who are doing great. There are these white collar professional, jobs at like Amazon or Goldman Sachs or Mercedes-Benz, but because their families are so poor, they're saving every dollar they have, and they're staying in the slums with their families to ensure that they can use that money to pay off medical bills or other loans and so on. And so what their bosses don't realize is every day when they go home to the slums. And so they're living these two lives. One in these glass ivory towers that are so powerful and so much wealth, and the other is in these slums where their families are. And I think that empathy and that education will restructure management principles and working principles and opportunities, and really recontextualize for these companies how they can best serve their employees and how they can get a new generation of employees into their workforce that were just as skilled and just as talented if only given those right opportunities. So I'm a strong believer in this concept of reverse mentorship. So I'm really glad you brought that up, Luna.
And Pradip, did you have anything to add?
I'll be very brief. I just want to say this. Usually, we don't have this reverse mentorship mentality, but recently we started this. We are starting actually. Right now, I'm in the flatland Madhesh, where we never heard about the Madhesi Dalit women and then Dalit young girls. Right now, we design the programs where we can learn from them also, and then it's kind of not exactly reverse mentorship, but we're trying to learn from them, and then mutually we have an expert also, and then they are also going and staying with them and then learning from them. So for example, there's a Mithila painting, we're trying to learn from them. So yesterday I met the young girls in Flatland, and then they're telling me several different things which I never heard. So I think this concept is really good as working with the young people and then giving all the time talk. I think this is one of the things we need to think about reverse mentorship. I really like the ideas. I just want to say that. Yeah, this is great.
So also I'm thinking about this term of reverse mentorship, or maybe not even think about it as reverse mentorship, because that says there is one proper way of doing mentorship, but instead thinking of it as collective learning process, maybe.
Exactly.
I really liked the way Cherrie talked about teaching each other how to dream, and really thinking about what's possible, and not have this hierarchy of who should be teaching whom, and that it's a continuous and collective process. A quick question for Ajit. Can you talk a bit more about the decision that went into making sure that the Santi Bhavan students remain on campus rather than go back to their homes? Obviously, it wasn't an easy decision.
Sure. It was a very challenging decision, and it cost our organization quite a bit to do so. And we're still doing ongoing, it's causing a lot of ongoing challenges as we continue to keep our students on campus. But we made that decision for a number of reasons. The first, of course, was the immediate health of the students. If they're back in their homes, they are more likely to catch COVID, especially as COVID continues to rage throughout India and within vulnerable communities. The second was we did not want to cut off their access to education. If they went back home, distance learning is not possible for that community. Most of them have no access to Wi-Fi or any sort of distance learning. So if they're going to continue their education, it has to be at Shanti Bhavan. And third, perhaps most importantly, there's been a lot of studies that show marginalized individuals, particularly those from poor communities, particularly women from poor communities, are much less likely to return to school if they leave school for something like COVID. And so there may be many reasons for this. They may be forced into an early marriage. They may be victimized by potential greater opportunity to physical or sexual abuse within the community. These are really hard facts to grapple with, but this is information we had very strong access to. And so we wanted to ensure, first and foremost, the health and well-being of our students. Second, their continued education uninterrupted. And third, that they would not drop out of the program entirely or otherwise be in a vulnerable position during lockdown. There's a lot of studies showing that there are higher levels of, spousal abuse or domestic abuse during COVID, and they're going unreported. We are very aware of that being a risk for our kids. So because of these three different reasons, we decided we would keep the school running and even have some of our college kids that didn't have access or studying. They are doing distance learning because they can do distance learning from our campus that has Wi-Fi to their colleges. It was a challenging decision. We don't have all the support systems that we normally have, but thankfully a lot of people have come forward and supported us in different ways and made sure that the program is running. That's a good question.
Thank you, Ajit. And this is another good question for Cherrie, and someone who's your fan. Says, I follow you on Facebook and saw you once surrounded by pineapples. Are those being delivered from farmers to consumers? How did that process work? Who helped move those so quickly to sustain that economic flow during COVID for farmers? Just volunteers, or was there a business model?
Oh, thank you so much for that, Luna, and whoever asked that question. Thank you so much. I will go back. Actually, it's connected to Ajit's point a while ago about empathy and compassion, and also Pradip mentioned it. That pineapple picture, actually, I love it so much because during this pandemic, we had no idea on what will happen, right? But however, the moment our president said that we have a lockdown in Metro Manila, everyone ran to the supermarket and just buy and hoard food, because they don't know when it will end. And that evening, around 10 p.m., I received a message from a farmer in our AGREA Facebook, and it says that we need your help. Can you help us? Because I have this 15,000 pineapples ready for harvest. I don't have a market. I borrowed money from a bank, and I need to harvest this to pay the graduation of my daughter, who is the first to graduate in university in the entire clan history. And who can say no to that? I said, okay, I'll help you. Let's do this and bring your pineapple in Makati, where it's a central business district where I live, so that I can help you sell your pineapple. So how many pineapples can you bring me tomorrow? And then he said, I think, if we harvest overnight, I can bring you 3,500 pineapples. And so I said, okay, sure. But in my head, the thought bubbles how can I sell 3,500 pineapple? There are no stores open. I couldn't even deliver to households because checkpoints are in every corner. And we counted the checkpoints from his farm to the city. It takes 13 checkpoints, 13 military checkpoints. And we don't have papers to bring it. But, and second one is he has no car to bring it. So basically, I think, Luna, the most beautiful thing that happened during this pandemic, I always believe that your reputation will always save you in difficult situation. And your network is your net worth. So I immediately called the mayor where he belongs and, a barangay captain or a local chieftain, because they usually have a government truck to bring it. So we made it here. And eventually we sold it to all our friends and families. And you know what? In just one day, we sold 3,500 pineapples. And it's about empathy and compassion. Everyone was willing to help. So what happened to that right now? It's called the Move Food Initiative, or it's becoming an online platform. We've been helping now almost 27,000 farmers from one farmers. So by next year, we're actually launching this online platform to support the economic, in the question, how can we sustain the economics of these farmers? So these 27 farmers now, they know that AGREA, our company did not leave them during the most difficult time. So all the more they want to work with us. And I said, so what we will do right now? So now we're opening like an online grocery platform. And we also supply to a lot of online grocery platforms in the Philippines because of that one pineapple farmer call. So, it's really a ripple effect of goodness, I must say. And I really met and found people who are good during this most difficult times. And, I was presenting this to my board because I needed to be approved, as a business entity. And they said, how can you say no, not approving a new business model that is founded on empathy and compassion? I think it's just the best way to go. So right now, a lot of farmers are onboarding. We pay them with the right farm gate price, very ethical. We help them with the shipment. And at the same time, we also want to tell more of their stories. Everything is now being documented so that, in every country, for example, if they need this kind of model, they can actually copy and replicate it in their own country. And it's fairly sustainable. It's very sustainable.
Thank you, Cherrie. And I think that ties into pretty much the last question we'll have time for. And it's like, are you hopeful that the new normal, the issues exposed by the pandemic will get the attention they deserve? Why or why not? We may not be able to get too detailed into it given the time, but maybe a quick yes, no, and we'll go in the opposite order we started, start with Pradip and then Ajit.
I think I'm optimistic, and then I think yes, but we need to work harder and harder for that. I think yes.
Great, short and sweet. Ajit.
I don't think I'm at this stage. I'm not optimistic. I have not seen enough substantial changes on a governmental level. Whether it be in India or in the United States or on a corporate level. I've seen some incremental changes on the corporate level, but so far they seem relatively superficial and not integrated, thoughtful, and strategically planned out, bringing in experts to guide them and build out strategies and plans. Same thing on a governmental level. What does it require to really roll out these services and support communities in need the most effectively? I think we're having a lot of interesting conversations, but I feel like we always have a lot of interesting conversations. And unless those conversations are backed up with very direct actions, with very significant resources put to those course of action, we will end up with very little change and a more tragic situation where there is increasing gap that becomes an either insurmountable one or one that causes enormous social strife. So I'd like to say I'm hopeful, but in this specific situation, I am currently pessimistic as to what we're seeing on a macro level. I think organizations like the other panelists are working with on a micro level, on each of our individual organizations, I think we are trying our best and we are working very smartly towards solutions, but we can't be the whole solution ourselves. We need to see a larger investment from the corporate level and the governmental level.
Cherrie?
I think for me, it's a yes. I'm very hopeful because I never experienced in my 22 years in agriculture that agriculture has been talked about. And second one, though it's a yes, I still demand all the stakeholders to really have a collective action. Because no matter what we do on our level, it of course, it affects a lot of people, but on a macro level, it needs to have a collective action.
Thank you. And I think for me personally, I'm probably more with Ajit on this, that where I think on a micro level, I see a lot of really exciting things happening in US. There's been a lot of the concept of mutual aid has been revived. There's a lot of people helping the neighbors, and Cherrie, you talking about there's 3,500 pineapples, right? These things are happening, I think, all over the world, right? But at the same time, at the macro level, the way the economies are set up, the way the governments are acting or not acting, or like the prioritization of profits over people that's still going on. I think these things do concern me, and I'm wary as well. So I think it's a balance, and hopefully we can find a happy medium and keep like these collective actions. Hopefully, so as will be able to change the macro level. So why someday, maybe not right now, but someday. Thank you very much, everyone, for being part of it, and thanks to all the people who asked all these amazing questions. And I think I turn the mic back to Sanjeev.
Thank you, Luna. Empathy and compassion. These are values that are very important in our everyday life, but more so at this time of untold uncertainties and food crisis and race to vaccinations. Fighting for racial equity and social justice can feel like a thankless job, exercise in futility, but I guess nothing could be further from the truth. Keep up the good fight, because your tireless work has direct impact in the lives of countless people in the places you are working in India, Nepal, Philippines, and here in the US and beyond. More of us need to get behind your work, and we will. Thank you, Luna, Ajit, Pradip, and Cherrie. The next session is After the Pandemic, Charting the Path for a Green Recovery, featuring the Honorable Kevin Rudd, the incoming President and CEO of Asia Society, and the current President of Asia Society Policy Institute, and a panel of Asia 21 young leaders. So stay tuned, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Randeep, Luna.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.